It's time to hit up with some UFC predictions once again. This time we're looking at UFN 120, which is Dustin Poirier versus Anthony Pettis in the main event, or Ultimate Fight Night Norfolk. Pretty interesting card, actually. Almost every fight on here is pretty interesting from top to bottom. Not a lot of horrendously meaningful fights. Even the main event really doesn't have any title aspirations. The next 2-3 fights are really, honestly, kind of one of the fighters in them is retiring, and 3 others should be retiring. So the long-term implications are pretty weak there. Assuncao Lopez is a fight that I'm kind of annoyed by, particularly when you consider the Dodson Suarez on the card, but we'll talk about that more later. Tatiana Suarez, Viviana Ferreira, that could be a big deal. Sage Northcutt, Michael Quiones is a big deal, particularly for Northcutt. Angela Hill, Nina Ansaroff is a pretty good fight. And then the bypass stuff is just relatively interesting stuff. We'll open up with Darren Stewart versus Carl Robertson. I'm interested to see that Robertson's as big as a minus 375 favorite for this fight, because it's kind of weird to think of a guy who's 5-0 as an MMA fighter against next to nobody, and 0-3 as a kickboxer against good fighters, but losing, is that big of a favorite against a guy who has only lost once, and that was to Francimar Barrosa at a weight class kind of above what he should have been fighting at this whole time, and a match that wasn't very good matchmaking just in general. Robertson is probably the better striker of the two, because Stewart is not the most technical striker. A lot of what he does is physical in nature and involves his athletic upside. There we go. But at the same time, I can't really say that I have any faith in Robertson's takedown defense, because I haven't really seen it. And Stewart's got a pretty good blast double to his takedown game. And if he gets on top, I could totally see him pounding Robertson out. So I'm going with Darren Stewart by second round TKO. Not that Robertson can't win the fight. I think he absolutely can. But he is much too big of a favorite on a lot of betting sites. Jake Collier versus Marcel Fortuna. Marcel Fortuna, is this his first fight at 205? Let me pull that up real quick. Fortuna. There he is. Yeah. Okay, second. He fought Jordan Johnson and lost. I'm going to go Collier here, although, Fortuna could be a good bet. Neither of these guys are very good. I think that's what my problem comes down to with this fight is Jake Collier is a better athlete than he appears to be, but not really a ton that's put together in his game that actually works. And Fortuna has limited cardio and limited connective tissue to his game as well. He's kind of got punching power, and he's a very aggressive grappler, but not necessarily an effective aggressive grappler. I'm going with Collier because I think he can push Fortuna into uncomfortable areas and keep a pace long enough to put enough in the bag to actually get the win. And I predict the third round between these two will be kind of ugly if it gets that far, because I think they'll both be gassed. Fortuna is training with AKA. I could see that having some long-term positive repercussions. I just don't necessarily think we'll see it yet, because I think a lot of the problems with Fortuna are mental problems that tend to be the longest to fix of anything. Speaking of mental problems, Court McGee versus Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland is in a very similar boat to that. I think mentally his game is kind of limited. He's kind of got the George Masvidal syndrome, where for him to really take the fight to you, you have to almost be convincing him that you're beating the crap out of him. And that leads to him getting into a lot of close exchanges that he could easily lose and possibly lose a fight. That could happen here, but Court McGee really is a low bar for physical attributes of guys that have historically beaten Sean Strickland. he has some of the game of Kamaru Usman, but I think I want to say he lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio as well. Did Strickland lose to Santiago? I think Strickland lost to Ponzinibbio. Like, he has some of those elements, but to a lot lesser degree. And I foresee Strickland being the longer fighter, being the more well put together fighter, the more athletic fighter, and just kind of being able to hit McGee as he's coming in, being able to hit McGee at range, and being able to pile up some points to a degree similar to how Ben Saunders did it. And also being, notably, a much better defensive wrestler than a guy like Ben Saunders. So, gonna go with Strickland, but I never am particularly confident in Sean Strickland because he lets fights get away from him. Angela Hill, Nina Ansaroff. I'm going with Angela Hill by decision. Relatively confident in this one. I think she's the more athletic of the two. I think she has power. Also advantage over Ansaroff. Excuse me. Ansaroff likes to be able to sit down in the pocket, use her hand speed and her power and her comfortableness there to scare people off. And I don't think she can do that to Angela Hill. She's pretty tough, pretty powerful in her own right. Better when she's moving, using her footwork, which I hope to see her do, and picking up a decision. She kind of needs this. I mean, at the same time, I mean, you would think that she should have destroyed Caitlin Medeiros and Ashley Yoder, and she did not. So, I don't know. But I think you look at the list of people who've beaten Angela Hill, Ansaroff's just not quite at that level. Sage Northcutt, Michael Quinones. I'm going with Northcutt by decision, but I've been varying back and forth on this one. Quinones' game is built to not really take advantage of the flaws of Northcutt's game. Northcutt doesn't really handle pressure well. His wrestling game might be better training with Team Alpha Male, but I just don't think that's the right gym for him. I thought TriStar would be a much better fit, but it seems that when his father clashes with coaching, it tends to result in him leaving the camp. And I think honestly that's just a bad recipe for long-term success. But like I said, the traditional things that break Northcutt are not really present in Quinones' game, except for the ability to hit hard. And Northcutt does seem to shut down a little bit if he does get hurt. So Quinones could hurt him, and that could be the beginning of the end. But don't rate Quinones very highly in it if he's at an athletic disadvantage, which he is here, because Northcutt is a fantastic athlete. Like all the negative things I'm going to say, almost always breaking down a Sage Northcutt fight, there's some positives. He's incredibly athletic and a very talented striker. But his defensive striking needs work, transitional game needs work, ground game needs work, mental toughness needs work. Just a lot needs work. He came to the UFC too early. Like, that's kind of what it gets down to. I kind of wonder a lot of the time if he really wants to be doing this, or if this is something that he's kind of being pushed into by his dad. So, I don't know. We'll see. Tatiana Suarez versus Viviana Pereira. I'm going with Suarez in this one, but she's been off a really long time. She's not fought since, I think it's like a year and a half now. Also very new to the game. Pereira's got a huge experience advantage. Much, much better striker. I mean, this is a classic wrestler versus striker dilemma. But I think Suarez can get takedowns because Pereira is very takedownable. I mean, she did pretty well against Jamie Moyle in that regard, but I do remember Valerie Letourneau taking her down and achieving dominant position very quickly, which is obviously a bit of a problem. And, you know, had Letourneau continued to push that advantage, she probably could have won the fight. So, if Suarez can't get the takedowns, Pereira is going to pick her apart on the feet and destroy her that way. but I think she can get the takedowns. I think she can get dominant positions on the ground. I think she can ride it out. That being said, perhaps fantastic athlete. I think much more upside, but women have had a historically hard time. Like, just good takedown game has taken a lot of women a very long way in MMA because women's MMA is still developing and still creating camps that can create the proper training environment. And that's why I'm going with Suarez. Whereas if this is like 5 years down the road, and we have almost the same matchup, an up-and-coming wrestler versus an up-and-coming striker who's very athletic, I may at that time have to start going with the striker, but we're not at that point yet. John Dodson, Marlon Moraes. I'm going with Dodson by decision. I think he has an athletic advantage over Moraes, speed, power, etc. And I like Moraes' offensive striking more than I like Dodson's, but Dodson's a better defensive fighter, and Moraes is very, very hittable. And doesn't necessarily press some kind of huge pace advantage either. So yeah, I don't see a reason not to pick Dodson is what it comes down to, and that makes me very sad because Moraes, World Series of Fighting champion, they brought him in, had some fanfare, and then put him in raid against Rafael Assuncao and now against John Dodson. And I feel like that's just setting up someone to fail and not make money off them. And that's bad matchmaking, in my opinion. That's just really all there is to it. Joe Lozon, Clay Guida. I'm going with Guida by decision. I don't have a lot of nice things to say about Guida, and I never have. I always thought his reputation as a great action fighter was one of the greatest mysteries to me in MMA. I never understood why that was really a reputation at any time. I mean, said Lozon kind of has to finish you in the first round to really win fights. He gasses out. He's always had gas problems, but they're getting worse, quite possibly, and his ability to actually finish people is fading. And then on top of that, you have the fact that Guida is still fairly tough. Yes, he's getting finished now, but it's tending to be later in fights. And, just beat Eric Koch, who probably hits harder than Lozon. Going with Guida. Rafael Assuncao versus Matthew Lopez. There's no reason for me to pick Lopez here. He's an interesting prospect of a fighter. He's aggressive. He's long. He's powerful on the feet, but sloppy. He's got good takedowns. He's got a very good grappling game, but Assuncao is... we kind of forget this. He is a grappler by trade. A very good counter-punching game, which should lead to him lighting up Lopez, because Lopez defensively needs a lot of work. And, yeah, I think this is actually kind of an easy fight for Assuncao, and I would totally put Lopez against Moraes, let that be a more interesting fight, and do Dodson versus Assuncao, and that's why I don't like either of these bantamweight fights. Nate Marquardt, Cesar Ferreira, another easy one. Ferreira is fragile enough and glass-jawed enough that Marquardt can knock him out, but at this point in his career, I don't know how much I'm counting on Nate Marquardt to actually knock people out. He's kind of adapted a stalling clinch, stalling range game, looking for like the perfect opportunity, realizing his own vulnerability on gas tank and his own vulnerability on chin, and the fact that he's getting hurt more often. Ferreira is a good enough striker to win that kind of exchange, so I'm going with Cesar Ferreira by unanimous decision. Andrei Arlovski versus Junior Albini. I'm taking Albini to knock out Arlovski. His chin has never been good, but what it takes to knock Andrei Arlovski out is getting worse, and physically he's declining from a speed standpoint. The hand speed's not there. That's leading to more offensive opportunities. Albini would still be the worst fighter he's lost to, even in this current run of losing to Marcin Tybura, Francis Ngannou, Josh Barnett, Alistair Overeem, Stipe Miocic. I mean, Albini is the weakest one. But, we said kind of the same thing would apply to Marcin Tybura, and he lost that fight, made it interesting at points, but going with Albini, and it makes me sad to say that. And that's kind of the downside, is that from the Marquardt fight up, I'm kind of sad breaking these fights down. Matt Brown versus Diego Sanchez. Diego Sanchez absolutely has a way to win this fight, and it's to kind of go back to the old school pressure wrestler, grappler approach that he used to have, but that we haven't really seen in a very long time. And that's why I'm picking Matt Brown to finish him by TKO, because I think Brown is determined to go out on a high note. It's a retirement fight for him. And Sanchez's chin is eroding, and it's exposing the lackluster striking defense that he's kind of always had, and an over-willingness to exchange punches. And I don't think he breaks Matt Brown quite the same way that he has broke some other people on the route to winning. Dustin Poirier versus Anthony Pettis. I'm going with Dustin Poirier by TKO, but I can definitely see a lot of ways for Pettis to win the fight. I think he's the better fighter. I just think that mentally he's not necessarily that tough. I think physically he's starting to break down a little bit. And while he did look good against Jim Miller, Poirier should be able to put him into some similar places where Eddie Alvarez did, because Pettis has never really handled a pressure game very well. It's kind of how it's how he lost to Alvarez. It's how he loses to guys, to Rafael Dos Anjos. These are all better at it than Poirier's, and Poirier's kind of prone to getting knocked out himself. And that's where the question comes: can Pettis knock him out? But I'm going to count on Poirier to hurt him at some point and finish him, because once you hurt Pettis, doesn't tend to really come back from it. Yeah, he's only got the one stoppage loss in his career to Max Holloway, but we saw it in some other fights, and I think once he got finished by Holloway, I think the chin might start to erode. So, Dustin Poirier via TKO, second or third round, I'm thinking. It's not a great card, but I think every fight on this card has some appeal, even if some of them, particularly the Albini-Arlovski fight, are kind of depressing, and fights I don't necessarily want to see, and some are not good matchmaking, like Dodson versus Suarez, and I don't necessarily want to see it right now, but it's got enough there to be interesting. So I got the usual links down below, and the quick summary of my picks down below. So enjoy it. It's a free fight card, and it should deliver some fun action, some stoppages, and some good fights. So there definitely is that.